neuromuscular junction reinnervation in the field of molecular neuroscience. Next fall, Kevin will be attending UConn, University of Connecticut, where he will be majoring in pathobiology. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Kevin Greco.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, so I have the condensed version here, so you can tell I mean business. All right. So this is my research, the novel role of glial cannabinoid type 1 receptors in neuromuscular junction reinnervation. Oh, sorry. I just want to make sure you guys are all awake. Yeah. Don't worry, we have one more. Okay, to begin, neuromuscular junctions, also known as NMJs, are tripartite synapse, which is the connection between your brain and your muscles, in short. So, oh my god, I keep doing it. Okay, let's restart. Neuromuscular junctions are a tripartite synapse, which means 3 parts. It's kind of like me and my boys, you know? I'm the perisynaptic Schwann cell, Sam is the presynaptic terminal, and Lucas is the postsynaptic terminal. Now, injuries, like difficulties in science research, can cause them to break. And what happens is that the presynaptic and the postsynaptic terminal end up breaking from one another. And this causes issues regarding just injuries over time. It can cause them to be real detriments to function. Now, perisynaptic Schwann cells are important because they regulate the neuromuscular junctions. And muscarinic receptors, which are located on the perisynaptic Schwann cells, they regulate them, so they regulate a bunch of the functions. And perisynaptic Schwann cells largely rely on calcium-dependent mechanisms to switch from one phenotype to the next. If it's in a repair phenotype, it's going to be working together to regulate the neuromuscular junction. But if it decreases its calcium levels, then what's going to happen is it's going to switch to a repair phenotype and repair the relationship between all of the parts. Cannabinoids, also known as CB1s, are important to the central nervous system. However, their role within peripheral nervous system remains largely unknown, and the peripheral nervous system is what we just regulate or what is part of the neuromuscular junction. Perez-Gonzalez et al., to put it in short, they found the role of the muscarinic receptors, the calcium responses and PSCs, were observed to be lower after periods of denervation, and then after periods of reinnervation, they caused to increase once more. So what's the goal? What's the purpose here? The gap in the research is little is known about the role of the cannabinoid type 1 receptors during repair cycles, and the goal was to figure out this novel, newish role, and the hypothesis was, since we know that cannabinoids have an implication during reinnervation, then altering the CB1 should ultimately modify the perisynaptic Schwann cell's properties and cause it to switch from one phenotype to the next. So, for the methods, first we used a specific mouse model which knocked out the CB1 in a genetic approach, and then we used tamoxifen treatment, and this was administered daily to ensure that the gene treatment was actually procured. However, we used a significantly longer period for recovery, 19 weeks, when it should have been around 3 to 4, which caused issues later down in the study, but don't worry, we'll get into those. And to produce this such injury and cause the break between the postsynaptic presynaptic terminals, there was an injury that occurred at the hip, and then drugs were administered to reduce the amount of inflammation 6 to 8 hours post-injury. And then for the calcium imaging, this was just to measure the activity that went on during the perisynaptic Schwann cells, and so it was incubated with the calcium indicator, also known as 404AM, and then the local application of muscarine to activate and cause the perisynaptic Schwann cell to do its functions would occurred, and then we recorded the variation, and you can kind of see what it looks like in the bottom right. That's what it actually looks like, and then just the big center picture is just how it looks like when we did the process. So for the analysis, I could go on and on about this, but to put it simply, we analyzed the image stacks that we took from the calcium imaging using ImageJ, and we set the significance value at p is less than 0.05, and we did not do this. So for the results, the wild type, the contralateral leg, just to note that the big N means the number of mice that we used, and the little n means the number of samples that we used, we found that 57% actually had some sort of calcium response, and this was also the same case for the 16 days post-injury. However, their issues arose after the GFAP knockout, which is the CB1 knockout, and that we found that for the contralateral leg, which is the opposite leg, the control leg, there was 50% responded to some sort of calcium response, and meanwhile only 27% responded to in the 16 days post-injury. So then there was the calcium response magnitude was quantified across all 4 groups, and what we found is that the p-value was significantly higher than the significance value, ultimately meaning that the values were not significant. And this is largely due to the tamoxifen treatment following being that 19-week period, ultimately causing issues because the knockout was able to reprocess itself and thus able to perform its functions. So not being fully knocked out. And then for the conclusion, the ratio of responding cells was significantly lower in the CB1 knockout, which may suggest that there is something going on underlying the effects of the CB1 knockout and how it responds to calcium responses. But due to the high amounts of, the high statistical analysis values and not being statistically significant, ultimately this means that we don't really know, and more future research is needed. And speaking of which, so we need to account for, again, the 3 to 5 week recovery period. Alongside, we could use another pharmacological approach using some sort of, like tamoxifen-like treatment. And then we need to cross-validate the results. And then possibly a larger sample size. At the end of the day, larger is sample size, it can be always better for testing the results. And then finally, just to recap everything, the study tested whether CB1 receptors affected peristaltic response cells during neuromuscular junction repair. And then the knockout, 16 days post-injury, had fewer responding peristaltic response cells. Sorry, I like to laugh a little bit when I get up on stage. But and then the cannabinoid type 1 receptors play a possible role in peristaltic response cell calcium responses during repair, but ultimately more research is needed. Oh, that was bad. Anyways, I would like to thank my science research teacher, Miss Gillian Ronaldo. Get it? Because I did that during the first presentation that I ever gave. My science research family, not peers because we're a family here, both past and present. And then finally my mentors, we have a French Canadian in the room. So, Université de Montréal, Dr. Danielle Arbor and Dr. Richard Robitaille. Thank you. Is there any, oh, sorry. Years, by the way.
My name is Kelly Soto Lopez, and I'll be conducting research involving marine-derived biohybrid therapeutics for osteoarthritis, fermenting jellyfish collagen to modulate joint inflammation and promote regeneration, under the guidance of my mentor, Joe Bell, at the University of Taiwan. At this time, if there are any questions for Kevin, they may ask now. No questions? Thank you.